Okay, hoping for the best. We're going to go ahead with the stages 5 through 7 of consciousness. There's been some reaction to stage 4 that it seems pretty hopeless, and actually it is hopeful, and I'll tell you why. So what Dr. Stein has done, and I'm reading from Jung's Map of the Soul, an introduction by Dr. Mary Stein, and this book is the basis of the BTS album Map of the Soul Persona. I don't think that they're getting into this level in Map of the Soul Persona, and a lot of people think that there are going to be at least 2 additional albums taken from this book, and one can hope so. But in any case, I believe that this is an important aspect of Jungian psychology. So if you're going to be led into Jungian psychology by BTS, then this is something that you should know about. Hello, Nikki. My mother is wondering if there is a community chat room for this channel, like Discord, Telegram, etc. No, there is not, and I will look into that. It's something that I've been remiss about. I'm only one man, so I can only do so much. But I will definitely look into Discord because several people have mentioned it to me, and I'm not exactly sure how it works. And there's another one called Telegram. So I'll note both of those and see what can be discussed in there. It might be very helpful. We used to do community chat rooms way back even before the World Wide Web was formed. And well, let's see, not before it was formed, but before it became public and commercial. And so we probably need to get back to that technology. I know that there's some people that would perhaps like to ask questions, and so I will look into that in the next few days. But today I'm on Jung's Map of the Soul, an introduction by Dr. Mary Stein, and I'm into the 5th stage of consciousness. And so I'm going to read this segment of this book and then take what comments I can take, and I have to go in 40 minutes. I have 40 minutes before I have a committed interview, and so I'll have to be on that interview in 40 minutes. But for now, I will go ahead. Okay, so referring back to the first 4 stages, these first 4 stages in the development of consciousness have to do with ego development and the first half of life. The person who has achieved the self-critical and reflective ego characteristic of stage 4 without falling into megalomaniac inflation has done extremely well in developing consciousness and is highly evolved in Jung's assessment. But further development in the second half of life is reserved by Jung for a 5th stage, a postmodern stage, which has to do with approaching the reunification of conscious and unconscious. In this stage, there is a conscious recognition of ego limitation and awareness of the powers of the unconscious. And a form of union becomes possible between conscious and unconscious through what Jung called the transcendent function and the unifying symbol. the psyche becomes unified, but unlike stage 1, the parts remain differentiated and contained within consciousness. And unlike stage 4, the ego is not identified with the archetypes. The archetypal images remain other. They are not hidden in the ego's shadow. They are now seen as in there, unlike in stage 3, where they are out there in metaphysical space somewhere, concretely, and they are not projected onto anything external. So it's a point of recognizing that there are archetypes and they are in our unconscious. The expression postmodern is mine, not Jung's. His fifth stage of consciousness is not postmodern in the sense of the word as used in the arts and in literary criticism, but in the sense of a stage that transcends and supersedes the modern. It goes beyond the modern ego that has seen through everything and does not believe in the reality of the psyche. The modern stance is a nothing but attitude. So it's an attitude where you say, oh, that's nothing but the psyche. It's nothing but something I thought up. And it's not that easy. And eventually you see that. It is convinced that projections have been eliminated and that they were nothing but a lot of smoke and mirrors signifying nothing. The postmodern attitude recognizes that there is psychic reality in projections, but not in the concrete or material sense. If we heard so much noise in the woods, maybe something was out there after all. Not what we thought, but something real nevertheless. Can we observe it? Can we intuit it? Can we conceive of it? The psyche itself then becomes the object of scrutiny and reflection. How to capture it in our observations, how to relate to it when we do. These are the postmodern issues and questions. And so Jung's attempts at formulating a suitable epistemology in psychological types, a critical psychology as he called it, was an effort to lay the groundwork for approaching the psyche as an entity in its own right. His techniques of active imagination and dream interpretation lend themselves to interacting with the psyche directly and forming a conscious relationship with it. In this way, he was forging the tools to relate to life in a postmodern conscious way and to take up a respectful position toward the same contents that primitive and traditional peoples find in their myths and theologies, that infants and young children project into their parents and toys and games, and that the deeply insane and psychotic mental patients see in their hallucinations and visions. The contents are common to all of us, and they make up the deepest and most primitive layers of the psyche, the collective unconscious. To approach the archetypal images and to relate to them consciously and creatively becomes the centerpiece of individuation and makes up the task of the fifth stage of consciousness. This stage of consciousness produces another movement in the individuation process. The ego and the unconscious become joined through a symbol. Officially, Jung stopped at stage 5, although in several places he indicates that he contemplated further advances beyond it. There are suggestions in his writing for what could be considered a 6th, and perhaps even a 7th stage. For example, in his Kundalini Yoga seminar, given in 1932, Jung clearly recognized the attainment of states of consciousness in the East that far surpass what is known in the West. While he is dubious about the prospects for Westerners to achieve similar states of consciousness in the foreseeable future, he nevertheless does grant the theoretical possibility of doing so and even describes some of the features such stages would have. The type of consciousness revealed in Kundalini could be considered a potential stage 7. backing up a bit, there is a type of consciousness that is more accessible to the West and would occupy a place between stage 5 and this putative stage 7. Later in his life, when he explored the structure and function of the archetypes in the context of synchronicity, Jung suggested that perhaps these apparently inner structures correspond to structures of being in the non-psychic world. I discuss this in more detail in Chapter 9, but for now it is sufficient to suggest that a possible sixth stage of consciousness would be one that takes into account the wider ecological relation between psyche and world. For Westerners who are fundamentally conditioned to a materialistic attitude, this is a possible developmental option. Stage 6, then, could be seen as a state of consciousness that recognizes the unity of psyche and the material world. Jung moved cautiously in exploring such territories. However, because here he was clearly passing into psychology, as we have known it in the West, into physics and cosmology and metaphysics, areas in which he did not feel intellectually qualified and competent. Nevertheless, his thinking led him step by step in that direction, and we have to grant that he showed the courage to follow his intuitions. His conversations with modern physicists like Wolfgang Pauli, with whom he published a book, were an attempt to work out some of those correlations and correspondences between the psyche and the physical world. Let's see. I'm not going to read all this. I think after that, you should probably buy the book. But I do have a few things to say about these stages 5 and 6. So, oh hell. Are you folks still hearing me? That is the question. If you are still hearing me, please send a note on the chat, and we'll keep going. And Nancy Lee says, I missed the part 2 of stage 4. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm hopeful that you're still hearing me, and I'm going to go on and discuss the experience of John Nash, who was a mathematician about whom, that's not good. Okay.